Hello, welcome to my video for the MTNA of Georgia. This topic is on double thirds, and I'd like to just give some tips, some ideas, some preliminary exercises, and some other ideas I've had over the years to help everybody. This is for any kind of player that's played mostly advanced music. Whether you've played double thirds or not, I think this video will be instructive. It's not in any way a completely comprehensive video. It's not perfect in every way, but I have a lot of ideas. And I hope you can bear with me because there's a lot of detail work, a lot of technical talk, and I will try to be slow, speak a little slower than I usually do, and demonstrate maybe slowly as well, okay? My personal story concerning this topic is that when I was in my graduate school years at Peabody, I decided to be, big guy and play the double thirds etude, which I had no business doing. I hadn't played almost any double thirds that I recall, maybe just things like this. But other than that, no. And the etude was hard. Many of the patterns seemed impossible. And I learned it and I did it. But wow, it was a learning experience. So that was a couple months. It was not like up to speed on the metronome on the piece, but most of it was fast enough for performance, but just wasn't clean and as musical as I would have liked. So later, I decided to learn double thirds diatonic scales, and I practiced those for 6 months, 1 hour a day. I believe I used the Franz Liszt technique book that had all the fingerings, and they were contrary motion, parallel motion. So I did that for 6 months. Then a couple years later, I learned the thirds etude again. It was easier, which is usually the case. And then, fast forward to just recently, I decided to do an undertaking of how to make double thirds better, what kind of exercises you could do. And I came up with these ideas, and I found out it made everything a little bit easier. So let me tell you the benefits of playing double thirds. It gives you a strong hand, a strong arch, and strong outside fingers. I don't know, some people don't like the word strong, maybe independent, flexible, but all I know is when you're in a double thirds position, your hand automatically has a strong arch position, and it has to be stronger to hold it as opposed to a scale. It's harder to collapse with double thirds and play well, and your outside fingers are being used a lot. In conjunction with another fingers, you're strengthening it. It also works on having a supple thumb. Your thumb has to be very relaxed to play 1 and 2 quickly with the double notes. Your thumb can't be flat. It's got to be more like a 45-degree angle and more gentle and more relaxing to play double thirds. It works on your trills because by the very nature, sometimes you're doing double third trills, and that works independence of the fingers and trills as well. It definitely helps your economy of motion. If you have a weird positioning of your hand, like if you're playing a scale like this and doing this kind of stuff, when you do double thirds, all of a sudden you cannot, it's hard to make a bad motion, all right? It integrates the arm and the wrist and the fingers. With double thirds, you can play just fingers or just wrist or a combination, or sometimes your wrist is moving with it, so it helps the arm to work as a unit. And most importantly, once you do all this, your repertoire is instantly enhanced. Any kind of double third passages that you see in your music, once you've done all this, it's going to be much easier. You can already do it, or you can figure it out much quicker. So what are the negatives to doing double thirds? Well, if you just launch into it too quickly, or at any point you practice too hard and too much, your hand will get tired and your hand will get sore. I've had that happen a couple of times, just being overly anxious about learning it and playing it so much, and so many double thirds, and your hand just gets worn out, just like it would with weightlifting or walking too much or anything. So a big thing that I would like to really get across to you all is that getting your double thirds better, faster, has zero to do with getting your fingers faster. And one of the things I never forget in the graduate school, I took a pedagogy course, and I remember the book talking about people tapping on a desktop like this, and how fast a pianist versus a non-pianist could tap was about the same. It didn't matter if you'd been playing the piano. Some people just have a faster motor neurons or faster reflexes, so they're faster. And 6, 7, or 8 times per second was the limit. And it's also true that you never have to play your finger 6 or 7 times per second in a passage work. Even with trills, it's 2 or 3 or 4 at the most. And with scales, you notice you're never repeating a finger 3 times a second. So what are we doing? We're increasing our coordination. We're getting more flexible. We're getting more independent. we're getting used to these awkward patterns, but your fingers are getting faster. You think it is, but what's really happening is you're getting coordinated. That's one of my key words. As opposed to like with octaves, see with octaves the wrist is just moving. That's really it's how fast you can move. It's just fast motions. It's hyper, okay? Of course you can go slowly, but the reflexes of the wrist at your utmost speed. With fingers, you're never going utmost speed. So this should make you feel comfortable knowing I don't have to worry about getting my fingers faster. So it's basically coordinating, like I said. Now I have a bunch of ideas and tips and practice methods that I've come up with over, years, I guess. I never wrote it down until recently, but just things in my head that have just cooked up a little bit here and there. And I have 13 things written down. I'll try to get through them a little faster and then go over some exercises. And the first thing to doing double thirds work is to ease into it. Don't do too fast, too hard, too many minutes. Just something comfortable, and that's different for different people. So I suggest when you're doing it, a slow, deep legato. Okay? Keep the fingers in the keys long. We're not worried about speed. We want to feel the distance, the intervals of the notes. We want our hands to get used to that feeling of that position. So, legato. And relax. When you depress the key, relax. I'm relaxed. Okay? Like this. Very slow and very strong. Now, what happens as we get faster with our thirds, whether the scales or whatever kind of pattern, the strength, if you're playing strong, all of a sudden it's going to be lighter and more detached, almost like it's sort of a staccato-y sound as you go faster. Even chromatic minor thirds, which are very legato, it's easy to play. As you go really fast, it's almost detached slightly, but you have the pedal and it makes it seem legato. So, as you get faster, a softer tone and more detached tone. Now, what kind of ways to practice? One of the best ways to practice thirds to work on the independence of the fingers is just to play the top note and then move the bottom voice. So, if I was playing chromatic thirds, I would hold the top and just go, and then go to a different part. Okay? And then you do the opposite. Hold the bottom. Okay? Things like that. You can do them in different parts of the scale. Like that. Alright? Now, another way to prepare, once you start wanting to get the speed, say you're doing diatonic scales eventually, which I recommend holding off to after you do preliminary exercises, is to play at a slow tempo, but prepare quickly. Now, whenever you play any kind of double notes, a lot of times you're going to have a note that has to lift. Now, obviously, when you do, I'll just take A flat. 1, 2 is on the bottom. I have to lift. So, here's slow. Now, you know this, I like to use a little wrist when I'm going slow. Our bodies are not detached fingers, arm, and you can only use one or the other. It's a combination. And I don't believe in having tension in one body part by holding it still. When you go slowly, you can use more wrist. So I'm just moving very little. The action of the finger motion naturally wants to move the wrist. To do otherwise would be tension, I believe. Now, as you go faster, there's less wrist. Now, to move quickly, or to keep the same tempo going slowly and prepare, I would do this. Getting my other finger out of the key quickly. I'm not quite preparing and holding because the cross doesn't let me get in that position while holding. But watch, the finger comes out fast. Now coming down, top finger comes out. Alright? So, that's a way to help yourself get used to the speed without having to change the metronome. Prepare one of the fingers. Okay, another good way to practice is to do mirror work or inversion. So the piano can be cut in half from D's and A flats. And I call it the mirror principle. Some people call it inversion. However you do it. I came across it by accident. I had some pattern in my left hand years ago, and I just kind of did the inversion, the same way I'm moving in the left hand as in the right, and instantly things started working. You know, reading about it, I read that the right side of the brain is more spatial, the left side of the brain is more linear, and by practicing together, you're combining the possible best qualities of each side of your brain, and so it's helping your body. In just layman's terms, when you do both things together, it just makes one feel a lot easier. I've talked to a couple big name pianists who've also done this, and they swear by it, and I believe it was really made famous by Rudolf Gans, great piano teacher and pianist. So, for example, you know, if you're just doing chromatic scales, like with one finger, you just go, and you wanted to go like that, so go, or double thirds. If you're doing this, do the mirror image, so C sharp and E becomes C and E flat. Okay, so that kind of practicing is great, especially for double third awkward patterns that might be in your left hand. And even if it's in your right hand, doing it together will help. All right? When you're doing scale, sometimes you end on an odd fingering. And when you end, like a G minor, 4, 2 to 3, 5 is awkward. So you can end it by going 4, 2, 1, 3, because you're going to lift anyway. And even if you're coming down, you can turn around from 1 and 3 to 4 and 2 just as fast. 5 and 3 is very awkward. It's not as clean. It's not as strong. So I just cheat and go 4, 2, 1, 3, and you're done. All right. Look for the 5s and 3s when you're doing scales. In my exercise book here, wherever those double thirds are, I went and I just circled like B flat major, 5 and 3, E flat. It gives me an anchor point, a place in the scale to think, well, does 5 and 3 only one time? So there's, I'm looking for it now. I'm looking for it, okay? It's coming down. Now, of course, you don't have to accent it. You can do that when you're practicing, or just mentally be aware of it as a landing spot. So 5 and 3 in all the scales happens only one time. So to me, that's a good way to help your mind and body organize the scale. As your hand gets further away from you when you're playing double thirds, one of the things you'll notice is, like with a single scale, so my arm is like straight out at an angle, but I have one finger, so I can sort of get away with it. It's easier on a broken string. Sorry, I haven't had my piano touched since this crazy virus hit, so it's broken strings, out of tune to the millionth degree. So some of you will probably turn this off because you can't stand unperfect pitch pianos. But with double thirds, as you go up the scale, it's more important than with single notes to have your hand and arm directly over the note. So if you have short arms like I do, you need to lean more than some people who have long arms. That's just the laws of nature. So as you move up the scale, see, I'm kind of moving up this way, you know? All right? So just move as you need. It's more important to look a little funny and be able to have the right position than to look great and sound awful. And I guess it's even worse to look awful and sound awful. Now, here's a general rule that I've kind of made up. When you're playing double thirds, as we said, they're not always legato in diatonic scales. The rule is, whichever direction you're going, the voice furthest away from that is going to be lifted a lot. So for example, as I go up the scale and I play, B flat, lift, the top is playing legato the whole way. And as I come down, okay, the top voice will lift because that's furthest away from the direction I'm going. I'm going down, this top note is the furthest away, so I'm lifting it, okay? You could do that with chromatic minor thirds just for fun, to practice getting your fingers out of the key. But one of the things about getting out of the key quickly, the reason I like that, is because piano playing isn't about really how fast your finger goes in. That's a naturally fast motion. It's getting the finger out. It's a little weaker. So it's just picking the finger up quickly. So helping us do our third scales by lifting it quickly, that bottom note, we're helping ourselves get faster at the scale, okay? And so the voice furthest away. Short speed work passages are great, and this is for all music, but for double thirds, to help you ensure that you have a good economic motion. Now, like I said, double thirds are automatically put your hand in a pretty good position. But if you were doing something a bit odd and going slowly, like, well, go fast, all of a sudden you cross, you can't do it really with a wonky, crazy motion. You won't be able to do it fast. By going fast, you basically force your body to say, move properly. The problem is, then we go back to being slow and like, okay, I can do anything I want. Well, slow practicing is great for memory, security, and all that kind of stuff, but it's not going to necessarily mean you're moving right. And sometimes there's a large disparity between your slow motion and your fast motion. So if you can't play the whole scale fast, which most people can't at first, practice slowly in groups, or fast in groups, I'm sorry. All right, so I'm only going to go, yeah, it's the rhythm practicing that you do with scales and everything. But one of the reasons that works, well, I'll get to that later. So short speed work for motion. Another thing is to practice other music that helps. With double thirds, the 1 and 2 are very important to be relaxed. Your thumb has to be more relaxed than you would normally think. 3, 4, 5, these fingers move differently, but thumb sometimes for people gets, I don't know how to describe it, like it's stuck in the mud or it's on low gear, it's moving wrong. Too flat or too thumpy. This etude, Opus 10 number 7 of Chopin, you're always going 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So that's a great way. And that makes your thumb, it has to move quickly to do that etude well. And as a big carryover, plus you have double notes, which keeps your hand position very strong. So I recommend that etude as a way to practice. Also, the double sixes etude, or any kind of double sixes, because you're having to lift your thumb a lot. As you play the top legato, these will lift out of the key quickly, and that will transfer to your double thirds. Okay, now I'd like to talk about two basic laws. They're not laws like, if you break it, you go to jail. They're sort of physical laws that deal with weightlifting and sports primarily. But I've kind of taken that to this, because after all, we're moving. It's smaller muscles, but muscles that move, it's a sporty type of thing. So this one law is called the law of specificity, meaning specific, a law of being specific. The greater the similarity between the practice of something and the desired performance of something, the more effective it's going to be, which in plain English means if you want to do something well, do that. If you want to play scales fast, practice your scales. If you want to play octaves fast, practice octaves. If you want to jump high, practice jumping. So that's pretty logical, we all understand that. But you ever noticed in your music that sometimes you're playing a hard passage and say you want to get to 100, quarter note equals 100, and you get to 85, 88, all of a sudden you hit a wall. You can't get it any better. Well, why is that? Well, there's a law called the law of accommodation. And this is more complicated. It's a biological law that states a decrease in adaptation will occur to a repeated stimulus over an extended period of time. Once again, in piano terms, your progress will eventually stop with something you're doing. There's a life cycle to every activity. Every activity that we're doing and learning things, there's a certain life cycle or learning curve in which you hit a wall or plateau or you just can't get better. So why am I going to introduce a lot of these weird preliminary third exercises and things you're going to see shortly, which really aren't playing scales at all, or music? It's just some awkward exercises. Because I'm taking into account that our hands get rusty, we get tongue-tied, or we just get stale sometimes. You know that. And you put it away for a month and it comes back and you're fine. Well, to kind of stop the staleness, I've created these preliminary exercises, whether you've played theirs or not, or if you're doing it, you already did them. These are going to help our hands to do many different patterns so that we don't become stale. And we don't want our progress to stop forever. We want to get through the thing. So this is what I'm going to talk about. The preliminary work that I'm talking about, I think a person should do for multiple weeks or a month. However much a day you can do. If you have strong hands, you can do more perhaps if you're not too tight. But just ease into it. But I think you need close to a month to really explore all of this stuff. The first exercise I'm going to advocate is a single voice chromatic scale with all possible fingerings, for example. And I'll do it in mirror image. 1, 2. Okay. Okay, so what am I doing? I'm just playing 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Now once again, this isn't about speed. It's about feeling these patterns, which are very awkward. Okay? And then I start on 2. Backwards. backwards. Now, 2 and 3. So 2, 3, 2, 3. I mean, it's awkward. It's not fun. And I'll start with 3. And 3, 4. And I'll start with 4 and do that. Then 4, 5, which you're just going to love. Like, well, why are you doing this? You're never going to do some of these patterns. You know what? I have stiff, strong hands, very strong. They are not flexible. My palms are strong, my fingers are like steel beams. They don't like to be curved over. Like that Brahms exercise. It's really a lot of stretching. When I first tried it, I'm like, I'm going to have arthritis. But eventually my fingers got more flexible. Your muscles don't get longer. They just adapt, okay? So, doing these patterns I'm showing you will make your fingers adapt, because after all, playing double thirds good, well, or better, is really not the speed, like I said. It's getting stronger, more flexible, odd patterns that you're going to see. Then I jump into 2-note slurs after doing the single individual lines. I have 9 different fingerings I've created. Some of them are crazy. You'll not want to do them, you'll think it's nonsense. But the first one is 1, 3, 2, 4, and I do it like this, you know. Like in a single scale, except now 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4. Now if you notice, I'm not just going. A little drop is totally fine, okay? And coming down, and I would switch around 2, 4, 1, 3. And I usually do these when I do them together, parallel motion. Like so, if I'm doing E major, 1, 3, 2, 4. You notice one hand's crossing, the other one's not. And then down, okay? And then my next fingering is 1, 3, 2, 5. It's very not fun. And then I do the 2, 5. So I'm just inverting that. Then there's 1, 4, 2, 3. Minor 2. Alright, 1, 4, 2, 3. Now it's 1, 4, 2, 5. One of the important things to do about this is, besides being legato, is find the one note that's legato when you're crossing. For 1, 4, 2, 5, so I can do that legato, but if I started with 2, 5, 2, 5, I have to cross. So find that I really feel the legato-ness. Then same thing here. It's not that I'm tense, your finger feels uncomfortable at first. But getting that extreme legato will really pay off. It makes your fingers really flexible. I really believe in that. And some people think you gotta relax and detach, and of course that's applicable, but I think there's something else to our fingers that need working out. So that's 1, 4, 2, 5. I have 1, 4, 3, 5. Okay? 1, 4, 3, 5. 1, 5, 2, 3. Now this one, I'm having to lift the top voice, which is very awkward. And that's almost like forcing your hand to open up. Like in an etude, it's really how fast the thumb is coming in. Sometimes it's not how fast we move our arms, it's how fast the fingers come in or go out. And that's what this is doing, the 1, 5, 2, 3. Next is 1, 5, 2, 4. And so on. And there's 2, 4, 3, 5. I really like this one. 2, 4, 3, 5. And then 2, 3, 3, 5, which is maybe the most awkward, okay? Going up is all about getting 5 and 3 out of the key. See? That's lifting quickly. My 3 has to get up quickly to prepare for 5. So that's 9 fingerings for the 2-note slurs. You can do them in parallel motion, contrary motion, hands alone. I believe you should really not work for speed. It's slow, controlled legato. Then I jump to a 5-finger pattern, kind of like this, all right? And then I usually do these in contrary motion. Double note trills. Then you can do these as independent finger exercises where you hold one of the voices and trill the other. So it's, I hold the bottom voice, then the next note, now hold the top and do that to the bottom. I go like this. You can do, when you hold the top and the bottom, I do the same, I do each pattern before I move to the next key. So I'll just go in every key. Okay, and so on. That's a great exercise. I love that. I think it's really good for the fingers. Then for another 5-finger pattern, I do 2, 3, 1, 4, 3, 5. 2, 3, 1, 4, 3, 5. A little awkward, but it's a good pattern to know. Then all those 2-note slurs, the 9 different fingerings, they all become a 5-note pattern. How? So 1, 3, 2, 4, and now I go 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3. And then 1, 3, 2, 5. Then 2, 5, 1, 3. So all of those, 1, 4, 2, 3. Okay, then 2, 3, 1, 4. Now we're actually crossing like a scale. We're only doing 5 notes worth, but it's preparing you for the scale. Every possible pattern. So when you get to the scales or any thirds you see, it's done. So with those, you can also do these as trills a lot. When you're doing the 5-finger pattern, if you wanted to go 2, 3, 4, you can break it up, do trills and the scale at the same time. So that's my 2-note slurs, and then the 5-finger patterns. Now let's talk about chromatic minor scales, which are way more popular than chromatic major scales, which are almost never done. So the chromatic minor, okay, there's basically 2 fingers. There's 6 or 7, but none of them are going to be done. The most common, the 2, is sliding. When you're going up the scale, it's always the last black note of the group. The last black note of the group. When you're coming down, it's the last black note of the group. That's the slide. So slowly, I mean, all right, now what you do is you break it up. I'm just going to do the slide with a thumb and 2. Now you can do this 2 ways. You can physically slide with more of a flat finger type, or you can actually repeat that second finger. No, I mean, who cares? If it's more detached, it's slightly detached. So there's the slide. A good way to practice is really even slow legato, especially on the slide, which is really a hard thing to do at times. Okay, now I'm going to do the top 3, 4, 5. Oh, the other part to the scale, the other option instead of the slide is thumb. Thumb to thumb, thumb to thumb. So I'm going to go. Now when you're doing the thumb, try not to all of a sudden make the whole arm move, because then you're going to throw your body out of whack. So it's real simple. Just move the thumb. All right? Now, just do the top part of the scale. 3, 4, 5. Okay? Coming down. Right? I remember my teacher at Oberlin freshman year gave me that exercise, just going. I'm like, why on earth should I do this? Boy, oh boy, am I glad I did, because years later, doing the thirds, that was automatically helpful for me. And for example, to do that pattern, I'll put the metronome on. If you're going to do the thirds etude and you're going fast, or like Don Giovanni or La Leggerezza, so put it on 115. Just put your metronome, whatever. For me, coming down is harder. You have to get the fifth finger a little bit more under, but you want to try to keep the hand at rather still. You know, if you can go like 150, you know. So you know, if you can do that at 150, you can probably play the thirds etude and most etude, you know, most double third patterns. And the bottom, same thing. Use a metronome. Just start low and build your way up. I'm not a big proponent of metronome marches. I never really was able to have the patience to do it, even though logically I'm like, okay, that sounds smart, but I just physically can't do it because I'll start at 100 and just try 200 right away because I'm sort of dense like that. So with the minor third scales, the slide is less sure. It's a little less even sometimes. So the thumb, so I would practice doing them both. And then thumb. The thumb is a little more even, a little bit stronger. If you were doing a pattern that you needed a stronger sound, like here, I would use the thumb. I mean, why can't you interchange them if you do both ways? I don't really do the thumb, but I include it oftentimes, I'll show you later, in some third patterns, just to break up the monotony, okay? I would also work on these in turnarounds. For example, here's a trill, here's a 3-note turnaround, 4-note. What happens is the fingerings change if you're going to stop and come back. If I did a normal fingering, slide, E and G, I can't come back down like that. Okay, so I have to do different fingering. 1. How about 1 and 5? So now you do all your patterns in 6, 7, 8 note turnarounds so that your body is accustomed to all the different times when you have to stop the scale and turn back around. I know it sounds like a lot, but 10 minutes a day after 6 months you'll have done everything. Now there's the chromatic major thirds, which I really don't like. I don't practice them. And Franz Liszt, the patterns that I know are mostly coming downhill, and I know why, because it's way easier. So there's 2 fingering options for 3 and 5. 3 and 5 will go on D flat and F, always, or at least for what I'm thinking. Here's the first fingering. 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5. 3, 5, and G flat and B flat. So it's 1, 3, 2, 4, then 3, 5, and G flat. That's awkward. That's very awkward for me. Because it's hard to fit the finger between the notes and get the finger up there. And if coming down, it's also 5, 3. Now the other option, which I like better, is 5 and 3 on A flat and C instead of G flat, B flat. So I'll start here. Thumb on the G flat, 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5. So I'll do it again. This thumb and 3 on G flat and B flat is way easier than the other way of having 5 and 3. That's just my opinion. But you still, have to practice it slow. It's just not fun. The minor third, of course we all know they're all over the place. So, in my limited time remaining, so say we did all these exercises, the 2-note slurs, the independent chromatic way, the 5-finger patterns, you started doing some chromatic minor thirds, I would say, do those first. I think they're a lot easier than diatonic scales. Now you jump into diatonic scales, whatever. And there's 12 keys, and when you start C major, I think is the hardest because it's 3 and 5 is here. Then 1, 3, 2, 3. It's just mentally harder because your hands are always on the same flatness. Black notes actually help, for the most part, your feeling in the diatonic thirds. So to me, C's is always awkward because my fingers get jumpy and I don't have anything to grab onto. Having that black note helps the variety. So I would suggest go to C later. Start on E flat, okay? And I would go more than 1 octave, because 1 octave you're just stopping. I think 2 octaves gives you more opportunity to really feel the length of the scale. So I would at first slow, exaggerated finger when you're learning these. Really feel the notes. Okay? And as you go faster, it'll be more detached. So that's the diatonic scale. I would pick only one or two keys for a few days. Maybe a black note one and a white note one. So if we do that 3 or 4 days. Then introduce B flat and B. Still go back to the A flat and A, but it'll be easier. Then you'll notice, because the fingerings for C, G, D, A, E are mostly the same. 1, 3, 2, 4, 3, 5. So once you learn C and G and D, A and E fall into place, except for those more sharps, which are easier. For me, the most comfortable, B flat and A flat. I like those a lot. E major. E major is good for this. The G sharp and B feels good with 5 and 3. Anyway, so you get your diatonic major scales, and you practice those for however long it takes you to learn them and get them good. Now, I thought if I had some time, I would jump into the thirds etude, which, like, I can always sort of play it basically, but it's not performance level, and it wasn't in part of the repertoire I've been playing the last couple months. But lately, I, looked at a couple spots because most of it's very playable, and once you learn a few of the patterns, it helps the rest. Just talk about the opening, okay? The opening is so, controversial for fingerings. Here's the possibilities. 1, 3, 2, 4, which nobody does. It's like a tongue twister. It feels so easy at first, but it's not. There's 1, 4, 2, 5, 1, 3, 2, 5, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 2, 1, 5. Now, I'm not going to say which is the best. It depends on your finger length types and all that. I don't like crunching my fifth finger in a lot, like with 1, 3, 2, 5. That's just not comfortable at all for me. So I would prefer 2, 4, 1, 5. Even though the thumb is crunched, it's up on a higher note. And another thing about how we move our fingers, I don't want to really tell people because you're all advanced and know what you're doing. But, when you play something mostly fingery, you can do it from this knuckle or more from this knuckle, like you're waving. A lot of this etude I find, just for me, also with this, it's easier when I feel like I'm waving this way rather than this way. When I do this way, maybe because I have thicker fingers, it feels more tension in there. But this opening, 4, 2, 1, 5, I like this. And ideally, you want to, get a metronome. I like to practice it in triplets so that every other group is on a different part of the accent, upper bottom. So, 1, 2, or 5s. Of course, you don't play with accents, but just to kind of get yourself going. It's also good, maybe, whichever fingering you're doing. Like, I've been trying to get 1, 3, 2, and 4, which is hard, but I can. So if I sit there and go like, 120, that feels pretty easy. But if I have to do 138 for the whole time, right now I've maybe done it once in my life perfectly. What if I do 150 though, just for like a little group? See? So I'm only doing short bursts to train my fingers to get fast. But when I slow it down, it'll feel slower and it might help me with length. Another thing to do with practicing this opening is, of course, at first I strong to get the feeling, but eventually we have to play it so soft and gentle. To me, 4, 2, 1, 5, even. It's hard to do this. Oh, okay, the fingering. The fingering for this right here. I guess the fingering in the book is 1, 4, 2, 5. I never did that. I guess sort of, I've never done it. I do 1, 3, 2, 4, 1, 3, 2, 4. So the top, and then, so, okay? I would practice it very like this. Bring that fourth under legato, which you don't do when you go so fast, but it's training your finger to feel that motion, okay? I guess if you're up into a certain speed, it is sort of legato, very lightly detached. With the pedal, you can't even tell. How am I doing on time? Okay. So that's this pattern. Now, the really hard pattern, which people complain to me, is the top of page 2, that C sharp, that. Some of my friends or people I know have really good fingers, okay? Say, oh, that's hard for me, can't really do it up to speed well. So, there's either two options. That it's impossible to play up to speed, regardless how fast your fingers are. Let's just say 140, 130, somewhere in there. Or, your fingers are fast enough to do it, but that's not the whole battle of just having fast fingers, which is my complete belief. Nobody's fingers are too slow, it's just how do you coordinate them, how do you prepare them. So, to do this, this line here, I would work on two different voices, okay? For example, mostly the bottom. If you start with 5 and 3, it's going to be 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. Only right here there's a thumb to thumb. And that won't sound bad when you have the other voice with it. So, 3, 2, 1. See that? Now, sometimes you can start with 4, 2, 1, 3, then jump. This is hard. 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3 is an awkward beginning. So you could start like that, okay? I also don't believe that only using fingers, like, let's see. That's just awkward for me, to try to keep my wrist, I'm tight. But practice with a little bounce on each note. All right? Also, getting to that cross, you can't just use your fingers only. Your whole arm has to move. So I would go, or 4, 2, 1, 3, to 5, 3. So I would move my arm quickly, but I would do that, lift up the top quickly, okay? Get it prepared. All right? Slow practice, you know, rhythms, all those kinds of things. But work on the voices alone, especially the bottom voice, because 2, 1 are more awkward. 3, 2, 1. All right? That's my tip for that. How about, oh, here's another spot. I don't know if anybody else, I've talked to a couple people. This part here. Okay, right here. That killed me. I kept trying to play it legato, and I finally found a crazy fingering. I don't know if anybody else would like it, but basically 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5. But I'm not playing this legato. I'm not going, I could practice that way, but when you get up to speed, it's this. If you don't tip your wrist too much, if you keep it at the same level, and you pedal, it's detached anyway. The faster you play, there's a more of a detached sound. So with this one, especially, I really like this waving motion. I used to try to curl my fingers more. I can do it, but it just feels less comfortable. This feels more, I don't know. I can't describe the feeling until you actually try it. Really just, it's almost like a rock on a seesaw. And my hand, between a thumb moving like this, it's almost like alligator mouth. In fact, I wish an alligator actually ate this music sometimes because it gives me so much problems to play. So. And this, it's almost like it's curving in and you're not going down, it's like a C to me. Because you got to get out to here. And straight lines are not the fastest way to move, believe it or not. When people swing at a baseball, they don't just go from point A to point B. There's a circle. When you throw a baseball, you just don't go like this. You wind up and it's a circle. Slingshots, it's a circle. Circular motions are faster because there's less muscle contraction and relaxation. Every time I go, lift, move, go. Every time I'm moving a muscle and stopping a muscle. If I just go, it's one stop, less contractions. So we follow that same principle when we can, like, you know, octaves. It's not, you know, circle, somewhere circle, all right? Then you apply this to this spot here. I feel like I'm coming out and in. So I finally got that by changing the fingering and doing something that looks. The last little section, people might complain about this. I would use 1 and 3 maybe. Okay, so it's, see, it's strong. Also, sometimes changing the fingering breaks up the monotony. So, like, at 140, So I actually went to thumb here, okay? If I don't, I can still do it. Yeah. It feels like the same, I don't know, that's not so hard. So I would just put it at like 150 and just go, and just stop with that after 4 or 5 notes. I keep starting the wrong note. All right, and then, you're tired by the time you get there. So when you perform the piece through and you get there, play it, go to the bottom, do it again, like 2 or 3 or 4 times before you finish the piece. That way you're working on endurance, but don't do it at a fast speed. Maybe 75 to 80% of your speed, or 85. All right, so you just go slow. You notice I'm playing every one legato. When you go really fast, the thumb is relaxed, moving so much that it doesn't sound legato at all. Anyway, I would add the thumb and the slide together to break up the monotony. It's helped me. So, I hope these were helpful tips. I know it's not perfect for everybody, but if you have any questions, let me know. If you have any comments, I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with a lot of my suggestions, because this is just me. I haven't read books, I haven't asked people how they move. It's just me and my little ideas. And if they help you, great. If not, please help me to let you know how to make it better. Thank you.